Here's a disquieting statistic that might be intuitive to some, but kind of suck to hear out loud. Children that have two obese parents are more than 50% more likely to become obese themselves. Furthermore, according to extensive research, up to 95% of diets fail. And you, yes you, might even embody this very exasperating statistic. Everyone knows what it's like to start a health and fitness journey and fall off completely. Now, there's a whole host of potential reasons for this, and that could vary from person to person, but I've been training with people for a long time now. I've seen people successfully lose weight. I've seen many fail and everything in between. When it comes to the people that manage to get into shape and stay in shape, there seems to be one common thread among these insufferable prodigies that you can tug on. When you're looking to get into better health and better shape, when you're looking to lose weight, you're not just looking to change your body composition, your physiology, your physical appearance. You're looking to essentially change who you are. You're looking to change your identity. I truly do believe that this is an underrepresented point of discussion in this space. In fact, in doing some admittedly cursory research, I didn't see anyone really talking on here about it at all. I sincerely think that not understanding this very critical mission statement at the outset of the journey is why a lot of people struggle with not just weight loss, but weight maintenance, which is probably more important than the weight loss itself. Sorry, more philosophical gibberish incoming. Luckily, this will be relatively short in its painful duration in relation to the last video. So there's this philosophical thought experiment from antiquity known as the Ship of Theseus, or Theseus's paradox. Succinctly put, the Ship of Theseus asks us to consider, if you build a ship and replace all of its component parts over time, the bow, the hull, every nail and every piece of wood comprising these parts, even the black slave stowed away in the lower decks, whoops, sorry, remember we're talking about antiquity still. Are we logically justified in calling the ship the same ship? Or is it a different ship entirely? Even if the ship behaves in a similar way in all respects. If we're not okay with calling it the same ship, at which point was it justified not calling it the same ship? When we replace the first nail, the last, somewhere in between? Think about that for a minute and then go outside and play in the grass or something. We're all very familiar with identity. It's our sense of self, it's who we are, or at least who we think we are. Because according to philosophers like Erving Goffman, our sense of self comes not just from an internal space, but an external one as well. Your sense of self comes just as much from not just about how you see yourself, but how you think others perceive you. So what if you've been obese for most of your life? For a lot of obese people, that could be an identity rooted in being the fat one in the group, or being the emotional eater, or being the non-athletic type. We all know someone that identifies with being something they outwardly profess that they'd like to change. For example, Kanye West desperately wants to be perceived as being relevant, and Elon wants to be seen as a sweaty gamer for reasons. And obese people do this all the time. Being overweight is part of their identity, even if they don't consciously realize it, and often continuously express wanting to lose weight. And that's how a sense of self can be something of a self-sabotaging yoke around a person's corpulent neck. Changing your identity is very difficult. In behavioral psychologist Wendy Wood's book, Good Habits, Bad Habits, Professor Woods makes the argument that habits tend to precede identity, and I agree. You are what you do, essentially, which is an idea as old as Aristotle. From Aristotle's Nicomachean ethics, moral virtue comes about as a result of habit. We become just by doing just acts, temperate by doing temperate acts, and brave by doing brave acts. Of course, as we all know, picking up new habits can be notoriously difficult, especially if they benefit us. A person might start enthusiastically going to the gym, feel frustrated with the experience of going or some lack of progress made, and tell themselves, I'm just not a gym person, and abruptly quit, or quiet quit, if anyone remembers that being a thing. With painstaking irony, they repeat the cycle over and over, reinforcing their current identity and rejecting that new one, attempting to take root in the process. Not realizing in those self-sabotaging moments, the apple pie is sitting right there on the ledge for the taking, that the goal is actually to want to become that gym person in the first place and not get in shape. Furthermore, building a new identity is so difficult due to how much environment plays a role in your identity and your capacity to change it. Remember that damning statistic I mentioned earlier about obese parents and their children? That is due in large part to the environment the child is raised in. If parents only have time to consider Pop-Tarts and Lucky Charms a well-rounded breakfast for their child, order takeout for lunch and dinner every other day, and all leisure time is spent as a family doing non-physical activities like playing Switch and watching Netflix, then it shouldn't be a surprise that child doesn't pick up an affinity for physical activity and broccoli as they age, right? The history of the United States, especially during the latchkey generation, puts the current obesity epidemic into perspective. This shouldn't be surprising when it extends to social circles outside the immediate family as well. Social clustering is a basic form of human behavioral interaction. People tend to cluster around people that tend to look and think like them. If a person is married and obese, they're almost 2 times more likely to be married to someone who is also obese. Now, imagine you're obese and married. You tell your spouse who is also obese that you're going to lose weight. They laugh it off like they always do because you've said you're going to start a diet at least 7 times in the last 24 hours. And that cute gym outfit that you bought at the beginning of the year, it's slung over a dusty Peloton. But this time, by golly, you actually go to the gym longer than 2 weeks and you start losing some weight. Your clothes start to fit a bit better, the love handles aren't as lovable or as handily as they used to be, and you've got a little bit more pep in your step around the house these days. Might as well, as you're literally changing over the molecules in your body and becoming a different person. But now there's a household tension that didn't exist before. Not only do you have to deal with potential self-sabotage, but your spouse potentially trying to sabotage your efforts as well. Babe, I love you the way you are. Why are you so obsessed about superficial things like how you look? You're being selfish. You're not being yourself. Essentially gaslighting and manipulating you to make them more comfortable about the shifting circumstances in the household. It can be an othering experience for both parties. Them feeling inadequate in the face of your changes and you potentially feeling judgmental about their significant other's unwillingness to change or accept your current vector. Unfortunately, as a personal trainer, I've been in the middle of breakups and divorces as I've watched this play out in real time. And it sucks, and it mostly happens with women. You don't have to take my vague sketches as gospel. Here's an article relating a study from NCSU showing negative outcomes in relationships after weight loss. There's another article in the link below from The Hill talking about bariatric surgeries leading to increased rates of divorce. And I quote, "This could indicate that a patient's changing lifestyle post-surgery put them out of sync with their spouse," King said. It can be really hard when one spouse changes what they eat and how active they are and desires more sexual activity while the other doesn't. That can put a significant strain on the marriage. It may be important for couples to consider this and have strategies to maintain their connection after surgery. As you can see, the average person is hamstrung by their identity, which is hamstrung by their environment, which is not easy to change. Shedding an old identity could be like mourning a previous version of yourself. You can keep throwing dice and using hopes and prayers, but it's far more effective to consider that you may have to find yourself hanging out in new spaces, dropping old hobbies, and surrounding yourself with entirely different people, at least for a time. Some people legitimately have demonstrated a fear of success regarding weight loss because on some level they understand this and don't want to accept it. Let's look at a qualitative study from BMC Public Health looking at determinants of dieting and non-dieting approaches in overweight and/or obese Australian adults. It's essentially looking at the effects of dieting and non-dieting approaches to overall weight loss and how those methods influence the perspectives of the study groups. Here's an excerpt from the paper with a few quotes from the participants themselves. And I quote, "Adults' perceived identities also seem to indicate whether they would choose a dieting or non-dieting approach. This category varied from perceived identity as a fat person, overweight person, or dieter, to identifying oneself as a healthy person. The transition from dieting to non-dieting approaches was accompanied by this shift in identity and the use of different labels. This was emphasized by some as a change that happened immediately, with the new identity serving as a reminder of the food-related choices which were appropriate for a quote-unquote healthy person to make." Quote from the participant, "You know, everyone has a title for themselves in life. I am this and I'm that, and I was a dieter. Whereas I changed in that day and said, no, I'm a healthy person. And it is like a mantra for me. And if you think and act like a healthy person, you will become one. So anytime I say to people, if you're ever thinking, well, should I eat this or should I do this? Ask yourself, well, what would a healthy person do? I mean, a healthy person would occasionally eat chocolate or takeaway, but they would not have that as part of their routine, right? I eat healthy. I try to be as active as I can, and I have a mentality that says that I'm a healthy person. So whatever I do, I make decisions based on being that. I'm not a fat person, I'm not an overweight person, I'm not a dieter, I'm a healthy person, and I live in that scenario. All right, another quote. And I've known a number of women who have lost weight and their husbands couldn't deal with it and their marriages have broken up. And of course, you lose the weight, you become more vulnerable because people see you. You lose the fat identity and they see you for who you really are, and that's scary. It can be scary because it's almost as if you're walking around without clothes on. It's just that protection of while I am a fat person, that's what I'm known as. And another quote. Yes, certainly, my perception is people will treat you differently at different weights. I think when you are obese, you are both more visible and less visible and invisible. And so I think those things translate to self-concept stuff and identity stuff. I think that is my key issue now, identity stuff. And I think that's why I'm struggling with the last 10 kilos. Because I'm going from someone who is still overweight and still a bit fat to a normal size, and that's not a concept I have of myself as being normal sized. It's a threshold I'm having trouble jumping over. Wendy Wood's previously mentioned book uses the term habitual disruptors. A habitual disruptor is something that breaks the inherent stability of one's immediate environment, making it easier for one to adopt new habits and form a new identity. Typically, this comes in the form of some unplanned cataclysmic change or crisis in an individual's life. Moving to a new area, a significant breakup or divorce, losing a job, becoming a Nazi, etc. Though it doesn't always have to be negative. But some of us need to change our identities without some crisis to succumb to, so what do? I think participant 12 from the first quote provides that key insight here. The importance of identifying with being a healthy person by making smaller, day-to-day sustainable choices that have an accretive effect over time. You build a new identity in the same way you build a muscle. You progressively overload your identity over time, and most importantly, when you fail at being consistent with a habit, because you will fail, that is part of the process of building new habits. Just like sometimes you might fail to get a certain number of repetitions in a set or fail to execute a lift, you simply give yourself that grace to fail and try again the next day or the day after that. Because you only really fail at these things when you've given up on that identity change wholesale and not because you're inconsistent. You're anchoring these small scale habitual changes to a budding identity and overriding the old ones, and that won't happen overnight. You will not change your identity using pure willpower or discipline. Those things always waver. A disciplined person is not disciplined, they're habituated. I used to be a 300 pounds type 2 diabetic. The thing with me though is that I was always active and relatively athletic growing up. I just loved food way too damn much. Being an only child that was home alone most of his nascent years, food became a parental architect of my day-to-day in a way that, in some ways, I'm still addressing now. I'm ending on this point about me, not just because I'm awesome, but also because I didn't realize until I became older that even though I was obese for a significant portion of my life, I never really identified as being an obese person. And I didn't realize until fairly recently how insanely advantageous and privileged that was for me during my weight loss journey. I grew up with an affinity for physical activities like sports and performing things with my body, despite being at a weight disadvantage. I'd often get a lot of comments like, you're pretty agile for your size and you carry your weight really well. And of course, unless you're a cartoon character, you don't roll out of your mother's womb afflicted with obesity, so comments from friends and family members as you grow in size tend to stick with you. This corporeal commentary was always an external signal to me that my weight was holding me back, not as much from my full potential, but from who I really was. So losing weight wasn't a matter of just getting into better health and better shape for me. It was an existential crisis, as it is for everyone, as I've demonstrated in this video, hopefully. Except now, compare my life history to someone going through that existential crisis in their mid-20s or 30s that's been obese for as long as they can remember. All they know is being overweight. They've never played a sport in their life. In fact, they've actively avoided it due to the fear of potential embarrassment. Their parents are markedly obese, their friends are obese, their spouse is obese, and maybe they have 1 or 2 obese children. They hang closest at work with that one other obese person where they both can relate over their struggles to lose weight with each other during their lunch break and such. Would it be a surprise that their chances of success are stacked against them? Think about a person indoctrinated into religious faith their entire life, suddenly deciding to out themselves as an atheist. Assuming they were truly a believer at one point, that kind of dramatic identity shift doesn't happen like overnight oats. They likely soaked in a milky intestinal turmoil for some time before coming out of the closet, so to speak, where they probably hope no one noticed the minibar in the back. What kind of sociological, world-shattering consequences do you think your local preacher would have to existentially grapple with if they suddenly realized they didn't believe in God? How do they approach their loved ones? What do they say at service? What does that person even do with their Sundays? Just awful. If this sounds like you, I'm bringing this up not to suggest that the situation is somehow hopeless. It's quite the opposite, actually. You don't have to have an athletic history to succeed if you understand the power of environmental forces and how they work in potentially suppressing your identity shifts. This understanding gives you a larger sense of agency to curtail your environment to sufficiently nurture that shift. Talk to your loved ones and let them know things are going to change around the house. Tell them you won't be buying snacks anymore, that they should hide any snacks that they bring into the house, and that dinner is going to look discernibly different. Let them know you're eating differently because you're trying to be a better, healthier version of yourself, and that version of yourself will help you be a better mother, father, sister, brother, husband, or wife to them. Tell your roommates that on pizza night, offering you a slice could be considered an unequivocal form of assault. Tell your friends that you'll be eating out with them less because your health is of immediate concern. If they aren't 100% supportive of that, then I've got news for you. Those are not your friends. You'd be better off identifying with a different group of people. Even your job could be on the chopping block. What makes us economically and socially productive is one of the key ingredients to our immediate sense of identity. But if work is sincerely getting in the way of you getting into better health and better shape, and I can assure you that for 99.9% of cases it is not, it's an excuse, then maybe your job should be fired. You have to be willing to ask yourself, is this current occupation worth my health? What's the point of making money to merely subsist, especially if that subsistence is compromised by poor health? Sure, you're making money now, but how much of that money will be going towards medical expenses treating avoidable illnesses in the future when and or if your health starts failing or takes a further downturn from where it is now? I work in the fitness industry in large part because it reduces numerous potential frictions other occupations might apply when it comes to keeping myself active and healthy. I've been morbidly unhealthy before, and that made living life really suck for a while, so I vowed to never let anything, including work, interfere with my capacity to take my health into my own hands ever again. An economist might suggest that money now is worth more than money later, and that might be true, but keep in mind that the healthiest people tend to be the most economically productive. The longer you have your health, the longer you'll be around to be able to make money. Now, I'm not an idiot. Well, at least not in the context of this video. I understand that some people have a lot riding on their occupations. If you've got a family to feed, it would be privileged to sit here and say that you should quit your overbearing work to focus on yourself. Just keep in mind this truism. It's hard to help others if you can't help yourself. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. If you're looking for coaching, information will be in the description. If you'd like to help me make more videos faster, Patreon link is in the description as well. Laters.